Okay. We're on.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to be in this space with you and start asking you all of these questions that I've received from people in my network as well. And so I think to start off with, maybe let everyone know again, who you are, and also maybe the most important parts of your journey as a couple as well.
Sure.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Well, we're a couple. We're living in Tasmania, Australia, and we've met about 10 years ago, and we're working together as therapeutic relationship coaches now. And yeah, we met at a time in our lives where I was married with 2 young children. Aaron was younger. You were like really on mission and focusing on, you were calling in your woman, right? But you were on mission. And so because there's quite an age difference between us and we're at different stages in our life, it was great because although I felt resonance with Aaron like the moment I met him, we met at a time that there was no consideration that we were going to be partners. And so it gave us a lot of freedom to meet one another because we didn't have to be anything for the other, and there was no pressure to fulfill any role. So there was like a year period really we had a lot that we resonated on. And although we both had some friends on the spiritual path, we started to go to different spiritual courses together. And that relationship just very naturally deepened and deepened and deepened.
I think it's really important to place in the context of where you were in your life, having your father just passed as well.
Yeah. Yes. That is a big beast. My father had passed 2 months prior, and I was very close to my father, and it wasn't until he passed that I realized the role that he had in terms of being that masculine presence of a man who is on his spiritual path, and how much that was a vital part of my life. And his the 2 years that led up to his passing was an immense journey of self-revelation. And there's a whole other story about that that's not relevant to here, except that I had been on my path for, I don't know, quite a few years, but and I'd become a mother, which of course, birthed myself into mother and all that brings. But it was really this realization that we die. Like it really brought that home, and that this person in my life who I loved so much and always wanted to please and be good, and we had a really close relationship. But as I knew that his time was coming to an end, I kind of made a commitment that every time I noticed a veil of me trying to be slightly something that I wasn't, I committed to drop it in front of him. And it meant that by the time he passed, I had really matured into another stage of who I was. And there's lots of series in that journeys, but yeah, we met at a path that I was really committed to embodying my truth.
Yeah, and intimacy.
Yeah.
Intimacy was what you were really looking for.
Yeah.
And we had that. We had like a depth of emotional intimacy without anything physical, because we were at different stages of life, because Greer was married. And initially there wasn't an attraction on my behalf. And so it was very clean, very clear. And that formed a really solid foundation for our relationship.
Yeah, to the point where Aaron was homeless for a bit and you stayed at my mum's for a bit, and you said to me, like, you're like the sister that I never had. Like we were so close. And as my marriage came to an end, and then we did experience intimacy together. And as Aaron said, I'd gotten so clear that I was finding intimacy, and it wasn't just in sexual union or relationship. It was with life, with myself, with all of life, with God. And setting that intention and committing to honoring my truth really shifted the trajectory of my life. And that commitment to truth is really the foundation of our relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think another really pivotal moment in our relationship was early on. We undertook an initiation under the tutelage of one of our mentors, Aaron and Christos, and it was called Sovereignty Within Relationships. And that required and took us into the depths of any kind of codependence or neediness. For me, I cleared my neediness around the feminine, and I didn't even know who I was without this impulse within me, without this neediness. And I had to get really clear, A, on who I am, and B, if I even wanted to be in a relationship, let alone a relationship with kids. And that looks like me actually moving very far away from Tasmania for a period of months. And it was really challenging. It was a really challenging time for both of us. And ultimately, we came to a point where we had to be willing to let each other go fully and just say, you know, maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe this isn't. And we had that conversation because I was living in a very remote area. I had to walk to this really big hill to get phone reception, and we had that phone call, and I hung up and I walked down the hill, and I remember the feeling of letting Greer go. I reclaimed like all this power and all this energy that I'd given away to women and the feminine. I reclaimed it all and was willing to start again. And from that place, I said, you know what? I don't need to be with Greer, but I want to be with Greer. I choose to be with her. I love living life. And the next day we called each other up, and we'd both had very similar process, and we were just back in love again. And moved back home. So yeah, that was a very, very deep initiation.
Yeah, it was. And that process, as Aaron said, Illumina, was around sovereignty and relationship and also divine union. And I, with my romantic eyes, was like, oh, divine union.
Yeah, and me, I was like, sovereign, yeah, let's go.
But of course, it was our chemical processes in our own masculine and feminine natures, and meeting those and coming to our own wholeness. And how do I become the source of my own masculine, you know, having had my father pass, and then my husband, and who I was in a relationship for 17 years, was a long relationship. And then those structures gone, and then Aaron, my new love, left and gone, and me, you know, not having my own house anymore and 2 young children. It's like, how do I become that masculine presence? And then how do I hold myself within my own feminine as well? So it was a really, as Aaron said, we had a really pivotal conversation, and that night we both went through the same process without necessarily saying what was happening. We just had our own energetic full clearing, and then that we both fully let go, and then we both woke up going, oh, and it was really powerful. And then since then, the other thing to drop in is that we've since had a child together. So our son is now 5.25. And he's a little pocket rocket. And we have, my eldest is 14, second is almost 11 next week, and then a 5.25. So, and we've got a dog, very emotionally needy dog.
So here.
So we live, you know, with 78-year-old woman as well. So life is full, and there's a lot of relationships between us all, and a lot of different needs, different ages of the children. And our business is still young. You know, although we've been in the work, this aspect of our business is quite young. So that, you know, the business is like a baby too. So there's a lot of hats and a lot of roles.
Well, it sounds like a lot of cycles of death and rebirth.
Absolutely.
And coming more and more into that alignment, like this authentic truth, you know, of who you are as individuals and what you want to co-create. And I'm just curious, you know, in terms of, you know, if you look at your life now, you were just explaining like there are so many different needs and, you know, so many different dynamics that surround you. So how do you move from, you know, where, you know, Greer, you were in a relationship, and there was this, you know, system, obviously, with the father of your children, and then you move to this new situation, you know, where you're now like fully committed with Aaron, and you know, eventually, you know, there was a child born as well. But how did you how did you navigate the, you know, kind of the letting go of the old system, creating a new one, but still in contact, obviously, because you're co-parenting with someone who's in a different system, a different dynamic, and a different, how do you navigate all of those needs?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you develop like a strong system?
Yeah.
In that almost, it sounds in a way, chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you want to answer that, or do you want
Yeah.
we can take it in turns.
My answer is very simple.
You go then. He's always really, if you ever want a simple response,
And it's actually a principle that I recently heard whilst out in a rainforest, and we were talking about, you know, our impact on nature and how, you know, we can't not impact it. This idea that, you know, low impact or no impact, or how about we do maximum respect, showing maximum respect to the place that we're in. And that's what I would say has been the key for us to create a level of harmony between the two households, is maximum respect. Respect of our own values and how we wish to live, and also respecting the other households' paradigm and their values and choices, and recognizing that the best thing for the kids is to have that respect, and for there to be a sense of harmony between the two houses, and to not have it be too jarring going from one house to the other. You know, I grew up in a broken family myself, and know what it's like to have like very different households with very different rules, and how unsettling that can be as a child. So trying to create as much continuity is the word I was looking for. Continuity and respect is really the underlying principle that can create that sense of continuity.
Yeah.
Is it possible to, because I'm just, you know, not trying to play the devil's advocate, but a little bit, but you know, when, for example, if I look at my own situation, right? So, you know, for people who don't know, like, I've just entered a new relationship, but me and my previous partner, and the father of my child, we parted ways. I think it's about 2 years now, and even though we have, you know, still a great like friendship and everything is going rather smoothly, like his set of rules and his dynamic and his home is vastly different to mine. So I find that there is almost no continuity, and we don't align in terms of how we want to raise Lowen, what we find important, what we, you know, there's a lot of differences there, even though I've been trying to, and on some level, there is some continuity, you know, in terms of love, obviously, and wanting to create a safe space. That's the only constant, and that we can, but in terms of basically everything else, it's very different. And I was finding it, and I'm still finding it quite of a challenge, that when Lowen is with me and his needs, and like the kids haven't met each other just yet, but he has a son who's 11 with also different needs than obviously my 4.5-year-old. And, you know, I also have a dog, and whenever he's around, because we also co-parent a dog, and he's very emotionally needy. He's an Australian Shepherd, and he's there. I'm really happy actually he's not right here now, because he'll be like in my face, demanding attention. If I put him outside, he'll be just barking just right in front of my laptop, like with his face against the window, like I want to be a part of this. And so when I'm in that space, when Lowen is with me and there's the dog, and you know, just the thinking about adding then also, you know, my new partner and his son, and then all the other things like work and my ambitions and my purpose that I'm working on, and maintaining this household, the cooking, the cleaning, I have a large garden and vegetable garden. It's just so much is going on. And how do you build something together in that what feels to me like chaos and lack of time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you know? Yeah. So there's so much there.
Yeah.
So I just want to go back a little bit and just add on to, I think what the number one thing needed is like patience and kind of this acceptance that it's going to be hard and it's going to be tricky, and how we navigated in terms of how many days the girls were with me and with us initially. That changed as their age changed, and we worked it out when their dad and I first separated. We tried keeping the girls at their house, and he and I took turns staying at our parents' house, and we realized that was too chaotic for us. So although we were trying to provide stability for the kids, as the parents, it was too chaotic. And so there is a place to prioritizing our needs as adults, because ultimately, if we're too unrooted, we can't offer that to the kids. So it will take a while, to work it out. I know initially the girls were with me more than their dad, and like that much more, and then it went to that much more, and then the girls like, okay, we want this much more. Their dad has repartnered, he remarried, he's also had a child, so there's another kind of child in the mix. And but as Aaron said, we've been fortunate that we have maintained respect for our differences. And also, this happened, we separated, prior to COVID, and when COVID happened, our families had very different viewpoints about what was going on there. And so that required me, as their mum, to really focus on what was really important for me at that time. And that was a particular thing that I didn't want the girls to go through. And so it meant that there was a lot of other stuff that I let go, because I wanted to hold that, so that if it came to it, I was like, that is a hard no, and I wasn't playing games with it, but I was strategic with a few decisions around different value sets. The other thing that's been really helpful for me is to remember, our multidimensional nature, and each of us as individuals, our karmic journeys, and that the kids have their own journeys as well. And we've got a great Akashic reader, and at some point we had a reading around why, because Aaron was so clear prior to coming to relationship with me that you were not going to be in a blended family, right? It was like really clear you're going to have the I think, right? You're going to have,
It wasn't conscious, but yeah.
Yeah. So having been brought up in a broken family, and I, so it's long story short, we had a reading, and essentially what came through is that it was before our son was born, that, my daughters have chosen this at the soul level. They've chosen to have two households with very different worldviews, so that they could be of both worlds and come into their own discernment. So macroing out.
And to see the validity of both. Both points and choose what works for them.
Yeah. And interesting, what has happened over time as our relations have gotten better and better, and we've become more coherent and we're very fortunate that the four of us have always put the girls' well-being as a center point of focus. And although our perspectives on what that looks like has been different, like you were saying, that has remained the point. And so we've learned that there have been times where and just, yesterday we had a little thing around, it's kind of a good example. And basically that if their kids aren't well enough to go to school, should they be allowed to do their after school activities or not, and one house has a particular view on that and one house has a different view on that. So, just like learning between what are the really big things and what are the not so big things, and choosing the fight, so to speak. So
I'll add to that having a blended family will brush you up against everything that you judge. and you'll be forced to confront those judgments and ask for them to be lifted in order to love. And this has been extremely hard for me, having a lot of unconscious judgments towards a lot of how mainstream culture is. And I had a lot of resistance in having that mainstream culture in my face so regularly in my family system. And I've had to learn to see the light of it and not judge it so much. It's still, not for me, but just not have the judgment around it. From this place I can accept and make light of this thing instead of having it be a negative and sort of dull my energy
and almost going to fear about it, not being what
I wouldn't say that. I wasn't in fear of it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, the other thing I would say is that we've also over time realized that actually our judgments about the other household, as we've matured as a parenting unit, the four of us, we actually realized that we are actually on more of the same pages than we realize. And that has only come over time with better and better communication and a commitment to just focusing on the girls and letting go. Definitely our work in relationship has helped, move through righteousness. Even though I sound a bit righteous in saying that. No,
it's true. Like righteousness will create a lot of friction and a lot of chaos and a lot of suffering. You got to, you said, you got to choose your battles, and righteousness will create a lot more battles and fights than is necessary. So you'll have to go of things that you thought you were going to be vehemently stand by in your parenting and just let some things slide. And ultimately the gift for me is it's brought me more into the middle path of having one foot in the system and one foot out of it. And in order to have one foot in the system, I can't be judging it. That middle path concept continues to help me to mature and be more functional in the world.
I really like what you're saying about judgment. That really resonated with me. I think, before becoming a mum, there was so much judgment on how some were doing it. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be like this, and my relationship is going to look like that. I can remember, I'm slightly embarrassed to say that when I was coaching, single unemployed mums, that I was like, I feel it was almost like a bit of pity, like thinking I would never be that, that is just reserved for people. That is just not me. And then when my partner walked out of the relationship from one day to the next, I was just at that point, I was baffled. In hindsight, I know what happened, but at that point, I was just completely baffled. Then I lost my job because I wasn't functioning anymore, not at that level that they expected me to function. And so I was unemployed, a single mom, and I'm like, wow, I guess life had to show me this. And and then I started to notice how much judgment I've been having around so many things, and it has taught me to view everything with compassion. And previously, when in the relationship with the father of my son, I wanted to move out of the system, and he's so invested in the system. He even works for NATO, and so it's this completely different, and now I'm in a situation where ideally I would want to move somewhere far away and live somewhere off grid, and I've got friends that I could, but I can't because I'm in a co-parenting situation here. And so it's like I was so angry for such a long time, and there was so much judgment and so much, and I felt trapped, and I felt this, and I felt that, and it's about finding that balance, right, between walking that edge and getting, I guess the lessons from both sides, and learning how to navigate that edge. And becoming really creative and attuned to what you're here to do. And yeah, I find that it was an easy lesson, but it was, in hindsight, I was like, wow, well designed.
Yeah. And I've got two things written down, and one of them is timing, and really trusting the divine timing of things, and that things will become available and things will move through in the right time if we keep acting in integrity. And the other key thing is to just lower our standards.
In some regards.
Well, like, as in, stick with our values, but let go of the rules, and again, notice those judgments, because I know if I'm judging something and there's like charge in it, like it's actually my body and it's visceral, then there's some kind of medicine piece for me. And even a few days ago, I asked Aaron, is it okay if I just allow my lower self to speak? I'm caught on something, and it was in relation to someone else in our life that has a relationship with the girls and with my daughters, and I was like, this is kind of triggering me, and this is what it brings up in me. And as I spoke it became this realization of like, okay, well, where am I doing that? Where am I doing that in my own life? It's going to look different. It might not be as bad, but if I'm really like got charged about, there's something about me. And it was great because I happened to see this person having expressed that, actually kind of ran into that person just a couple of hours later, and I saw them through the lens of compassion rather than judgment. And I was like, yeah, fuck, that would be really hard. I can see based on their worldview, and even though obviously I can't know their worldview, but I can see how that makes sense, for them. And so seeing through the eyes of love and compassion, and rather than that, right, wrong. Whenever there's anything to right, wrong, we know that there's something missing, I think.
Yeah.
And right, seeing things through the lens of right and wrong is actually quite a childish stage of development. Like the more we mature, the more nuanced our worldview becomes, and the more we can hold complexities and we can hold different viewpoints and see them as valid. And this is why we really believe that truth and love are synonyms. And the more we like really come into truth, the more that we come into our true nature, which is love. And it's also bridges into the teaching of forgiveness, and that ultimately, when we can truly understand what drives a person to act how they act, then we come to see that there's nothing to forgive. That's like the ultimate understanding, is that there's nothing to forgive. And in order to get to that place of understanding, we've got to have like clear, transparent dialogue, and know how to have effective communication and transparency, and to know what's really going on for us at the deeper layers, and not get caught on the mental story of he said, she said. Actually, what is this bringing up in me? What is this trigger? Oh, I actually feel out of control. This is actually about me needing control, or this is actually me not feeling enough. Like when we can actually, when we've got that self-awareness to really like get emotionally literate and give language to our emotions and share from that place rather than the mental story, then we actually use these relationships as vehicles for transformation.
Yeah.
Something that came up as you were sharing was also, so how do you, because me, but also some of my friends who've sent me a couple of questions, was around, what if like your divorce was quite traumatic. Like for me, that was, it was from one day to the next, I'm out, I'm gone, and I just had to deal with everything. And some of my friends had like similar experiences where it was just, the divorce was quite traumatic in different ways. And some of the questions that came up were around, so how do you stay open when old scars, old stuff comes up, as naturally does, in a new relationship, where you just at first so firm, like, okay, this is not, this type of relationship that I used to have, I don't want that in this regard. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for in a man. And then it's almost like you're scrutinizing every step he's making just to see whether he's not like the previous relationship, or whether there are any red flags, or whether there are any. And there's always, when you're coming from a place of fear, and you're looking at things like from that place of fear, there's so much you can find. And we were just having this conversation, do you share what is coming up? Do you openly share what is coming up? Knowing, because I've a couple of times shared my fear, which was sending him into his own fear, and we're just spiraling in fear, which was actually pulling the relationship down. But you still want to, because you can sense in the other person there's something going on, so you want to share, but you kind of want to share in that from a place of love, but you're just not there yet, and a lot of stuff is coming up. So how do you navigate through that, maybe individually, but also as a couple, when these things come up?
Yeah. We've created an 8-week program that is basically around this. How do we move this sort of thing? Not specifically for separated, like for shared families, but yeah. So there are lots of points to it, and I'll say I'm going to practice saying the dot points, and then I'll let you go deeper. Let's see if I can do it. So one of the first things is to notice the feeling in your body and actually come back to being in your body. That embodiment piece is so important, because and when I say the body, it's the somatic experience, and breathe into that and wait until that initial charge has settled just a bit before speaking, even if it's like 30 seconds or so, rather than boom, right? Because that's never going to end well. And the second key piece is to ask permission. Is it okay? I've got something coming up. And often we might say, there's something I want to share, and I'm hesitant at sharing it because I feel like it might trigger something. But I'm sharing it because I can feel myself closing down to you. And we had something just last night, right? I noticed that I had closed to Aaron because of something that had happened. And I was okay. And then something happened. I was like, okay, I'm actually not okay. And then we interacted, and I noticed myself close. And I sat I was with my son, and I could feel it in my body. And I sat with it for about 15 minutes or so. And I was like, okay, this is still in my body. I'm going to go and talk to Aaron. And I said, I just want to come in. Is it okay if I share where I'm at? Because I've noticed myself closing. Yeah. Yeah.
And ultimately what you're talking about there is responsibility, taking radical responsibility for our own subjective experience. And there's a key within that word, responsibility. It's not reactability, because whenever we are acting out of reaction, we're acting out what we call our adaptive child. So we're acting out of the limbic system. Our prefrontal cortex has gone offline, and now we're acting from a literally childish perspective. And if we're trying to relate from that place, it's only going to create more suffering, because the adaptive child doesn't want to be relational. It just wants to get its needs met. It doesn't care about connection. It just wants to get its needs met. And so first of all, if you notice you're in reaction, recognize it's a losing strategy. It's not going to work. So as Greer said, you pause. When you react, You notice you're reacting, you stop, you pause, you breathe, you regulate, bring back your prefrontal cortex online. And then secondly, again, it's just to bring it back to that ability to have emotional literacy and to know what's going on. And I think for a couple to really make it through, they've got to really believe that everything that is happening to them is there to benefit them. Everything is here to help you. Because when we really take that on and really take that on as a belief, for us, it's a knowing. We know this in our bones, that whatever's triggered is here to help us, and it's here to be faced. It's here to be integrated. And so in that way, we don't become victims to our triggers. We embrace them as an opportunity, not just for growth and healing as individuals, but to deepen our intimacy with one another, to deepen our trust. And I often say one of the greatest gifts that Greer has given me is loving me through my shadows. The parts of me that I felt were just so wrong, so unlovable, and just wanted to deny, push away, when I had the courage and skill. There's a skill to be able to articulate these vulnerable, triggered parts of us. And again, this is something we teach in our 8-week boot camp. It's a skill. We can give language to it, and then it's brought out into the light of awareness. And when it's done so lovingly, when it's embraced in a loving relationship, it's ultimately going to integrate, and we reclaim parts of ourselves. And that means I'm more liberated and she gets to access more of who I really am. So our relationship becomes even more fulfilling, more rewarding, because we're accessing more of us. So yeah, I think where couples go really wrong is not seeing the sacredness of triggers.
Yeah, and I think where they also go wrong, that was so well said, babe, is when someone's in reaction and they just come in and share at a time that's not right, where the person's not going to be able to receive it. And a classic example is when the kids are there and it's just, you just kind of can't do it. And so what we might do, if there's a trigger and the kids are there and we can't process it in that moment, and we've become pretty efficient at processing because we've really focused on this for 10 years now, but it's like, okay, we just acknowledge that, okay, I'm feeling, I'm feeling pretty frustrated at the moment, and I know that I love you, and we'll talk about it tonight. And so it's not like I'm not pretending I'm not annoyed or I'm not hurt or whatever, that there's a naming of it. And it's also what?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I know it's been a bit crazy because I ordered it and then I washed it. Yeah. So yeah, it's important to know. And the thing is, we're so, I cannot get away with anything. Aaron knows when I'm in trigger, and it is tough. It's hard when there's so many people around, and we actually need space so that we can move through this, and we don't have it at the moment. And again, that's where coming back to, what Terry Real, one of our teachers, talks about, is our usness. Coming back to our usness, remembering that we're on the same page. And again, we had a trigger that we moved through this morning, and we went for a walk, and we're like, one of us was walking a bit fast and one of us was working it. We're moving through something quite big, and we went to the shops and we got that done. And now our other line is like, I'm just remembering that the truth of our love, and that this, whatever's up is just up. It's because we haven't quite got to the root, or some things don't have a simple answer, and I love you. And that's more important than, trying to be right or anything like that. So
but just again, to play a bit of the devil's advocate here, because I get, like, once you're triggered and then you're in that reactive state, don't engage, and especially not when kids are around, and that's not helpful. But when you can feel you've been sitting with that fear for a while, like in my personal situation, there was this day where things were just too hectic, and after that really hectic day, where that made me feel like, how is this ever gonna work? How is this ever gonna work? Are we moving too fast? We had a holiday coming up with the kids. We're all going to go on a holiday, a 5-day holiday, even though the kids hadn't met just yet. And I was fully freaking out. I spoke with a friend about it, and she kind of told me a couple of horror stories of her experiences in the past where she went on holidays with 2 combined families, which wasn't helping. But I sat with that for a while, and I just wanted to, I guess, to voice this concern that I had. So the next day, I asked for permission. I said I wanted to share, and I just feel like we needed more time with just us, and maybe we're moving too quickly with the kids, and to maybe take a step back on, and even though that was well received, I can remember there was so much fear in me, also how he was going to take it, and he could sense that fear. And so you can remember he left the house to pick up his son. In that mindset, and in that drive of picking up his son, he has to pick his son up, like it's a 50-minute drive or something. He was then triggered in that fear that made him call me and say, I don't think this is going to work, which was my fear initially. And then it escalated. We separated. The next day we called, we reconnected, but I just wonder, like how to, because you can't obviously take not full responsibility, obviously, for how the other person is going to take it and what it's going to do in his own system and everything else. But sometimes just wondering like how to navigate those topics that that could be very disappointing, could be very like you just don't know what it's going to do to the relationship, that kind of level of, wow, how is he, is he going to be okay with that? Or is that not going to be okay? Is he going to, because I think in his mindset we were thriving, but in mine I was just not happy in that chaos, and I just needed more space. But it was around that eclipse and full moon, and everything was coming up for me, and and all he could sense in me was that fear that made him feel unstable, and this fear of me walking away. So he thought, well, I think she's going to walk away eventually, so I'm going to walk away first, kind of that dynamic. And we've talked at length about this all, but I'm still now finding, like, how do I bring whatever is coming up for me to the table in a way, it's never fail proof, but in a way that has the highest chance of it landing and not being taken in the wrong way. I'm not sure if there is a way, but I'm still navigating that. Like, how do I bring it up?
Yeah.
I think you just, part of it, I'll let you speak. Part of it is just accepting that you are going to hurt your partner, and that's okay. And I just really want to normalize the relationship cycle, which is where we go from harmony to disharmony and then to repair. And where most couples are lacking is they don't have a repair mechanism. They just go from harmony to disharmony, and then, we're in disharmony because they've been spoon-fed Disney versions of romance and love, and it's always meant to be honeymoon if it's a good relationship. That's not actually a good relationship. A good relationship goes from harmony to disharmony and then repair, because it's in the repair process, just to reiterate something I said earlier, that trust is really built, that intimacy is really forged. It's in that repair cycle. But repair is a skill. It's not something that's common in our culture. It's not something that's commonly shown on movies or TV, or it's not something taught in schools. It is a skill set, being able to repair. And part of it is being able to separate objective behavior of how someone was objectively behaving from our own subjective experience, and realizing that our subjective experience is just ours, and it's neither right nor is it wrong. It's what we can see, and learning to articulate yourself from that place of your own subjective experience of what's really going on for you, from a place of non-attachment, recognizing this is just how I see it. And then your partner recognizing, okay, they're just sharing their subjective experience. It might not be the same as mine. It might be completely different to mine. But how do we meet in the middle? How do we find the common ground between our two subjective experiences?
Yeah, and a huge part of that, when we come to the table and bring our subjective experiences rather than our this is right, this is true, you know, and that they seemingly can't be the same, is that there's a very powerful piece when if Aaron presents his experience and before I just go into, well, my subjective, and we don't use the word, well, my subjective experience is this. It's like, you know, when you said that, when you walked in and you said this, I made it mean this, and it felt like this. And so, you know, and again, on our walk, Aaron shared something and I was like, yeah, well, I'm really glad you shared it in that way, because I now I understand better your experience, and I realized that I was misinterpreting something, right? I'd made a different meaning from it. And when he shared it from a place of just sharing his perspective rather than saying this is the truth, although you were well, actually, this is my truth, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm hearing my truth and this is what I'm seeing. But if I'm actually willing to get up off my seat and actually come into Aaron's seat and sit and really listen to it and open to it, I can see that's totally valid. And in that experience, and as I acknowledge Aaron in that way, genuinely, even if I'm not necessarily fully, it doesn't mean that my perspective isn't real, right? That naturally will bring him more open to my perspective as well. And again, getting clear that the other thing where people often go wrong is they're focusing on it doesn't work when you do this, it doesn't work when you do this, and not actually really asking for what they're needing. So, you know, and you spoke about before in your holiday, you know, I'm a bit worried. And also, you know, it's good to speak to other people's experiences, but remembering that's their experiences and it's their subjective experience, which will be different to the other person involved. And just because someone has a terrible holiday with their family or whatever, it doesn't mean that yours would be. And what's important, and what I heard you saying, is that things felt a bit unsafe for you. It didn't feel safe enough or secure enough to actually go on this holiday. And so you were needing some more stability. And that's what I heard you. That's what you're really needing. Let's have some stability. And the beautiful thing about that is that may or may not, maybe you do go on a holiday, but somewhere much closer to home. It's more familiar. It's a shorter period. There's not as much moving around. You're in the one spot. You can bring in that energy of stability. And maybe for the week leading up, you're really focused on your stability, you know, like really working, doing like stronger yoga poses, consciously clearing your calendar a bit so there's less movement, and you're bringing in that energy so that you're feeling stable, so that when you are on holidays and the kids are fighting over dinner and the food's late, you've got some kind of anchoring to the stability, and you can kind of bring that to the table amidst the chaos. And honestly, we don't go out with the kids because it's just not enjoyable. It's just like, it's fucked. We hate it, and we don't do it.
We just get
takeaway pizza.
Go sit in the park and they can
run
around.
We sit in the park and they run around. Yeah. So again, learning the things that do work, and when you said, you know, what if this isn't going to work? How can this work? It's like, well, rather than how can this work? It's like, well, how could this work? You know, could there be another way that we're doing this?
Yeah.
Are we ready to go on holiday? I know. Are we ready to go on holiday? You know, the energy, it's really good to ask questions, but really asking them rather than,
Yeah, no, I get that.
How does that all
like? Yeah, well, there's so much you've shared already. just looking at the questions that people have sent. Yeah, something slightly different, completely different, but it's something that has been in my field for a while that I hear friends talk about. And yesterday a friend reached out saying, you know, she finds herself faced with two different types of men that constantly cross her path. The masculine man, but not maybe a very, maybe some bit of like toxic masculinity where it's very selfish, self-centered, only serving his own needs, that kind of dynamic. But because he's so in his masculine energy, she feels she's gravitating towards that. And then, she wants actually a man who's more emotionally mature, but then finds men who are, very kind, warm, loving, yet are, I don't know, very passive, very more feminine, and they don't, they lack goals or ambitions, they have no purpose or drive. And, the women in this cycle, they are very, very purpose driven, very, goal oriented. And, yeah, and they're like, why am I experiencing this experience of either having this type of man or that type of man? And it's almost like all the good men or are gone. It's that dynamic, or those kind of stories that are playing in my field, like where are the emotional, mature, who are in purpose and serving, but also very loving, kind, emotionally available men? What's happening in this world? That either have no drive or lack of purpose, or they're on the other, so yeah, I thought, also, with Aaron being here and the men's work and everything that you do, I thought that, let's bring that one in too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what do you want to know?
Where are they?
Where are they? They're coming to my circles. I see them all the time.
That's what I was thinking. Aaron's been so good. Come to Tasmania.
I refuse to buy into that story and that narrative that there's no good men. I see many good men out there doing their best. And yes, they're not fully integrated. Yes, some of them still might be carrying wounds. And guess what? Good luck finding a fucking perfect man. And guess what? The goal of relationship is to bring each other into balance. And this is what I was going to bounce off in our last thread of conversation is like, you got to realize in the yoga of relationship that we're coming into the relationship with our history and our childhood conditioning and wounds and traumas. And that can be a spectrum. And most often on that spectrum, you've got the love avoidance of those who need more space, who need the space to be able to regulate on their own. Maybe they don't handle being in chaotic environments. And then you've got the other side of the spectrum of the love dependent, the love addicted, the give me more, give me, and they just thrive being around people and get energy from being with people. And when it comes, you'll find quite often these people attract one another, and then they find that they've got to find a way for the love avoidant person to start to open up and start to bring in a bit of resilience to be able to hold themselves in amongst chaos. And then you've got the love addict side of the spectrum who's just got to learn to sort of meet their own needs a bit and allow the other to have some space and not make it mean that they're not going to be loved or that they're missing out. And they've got to learn to love being in their space more. And it will be the same if this person happens to be attracting in the two sort of poles of, men. Like, is it that she judges men who have no emotional depth and are selfish? Does she also judge the man that is, emotionally deep but lacking in drive? Or and it always bring it back to the self and recognize that what we attract into our life is a sacred mirror. And my question for someone like that is like, how are you going with your own internal qualities of the masculine and feminine within you? And that's not to, you know, shame them in any way, just an invitation to use that as a reflection. Go, oh, maybe I am a bit too dominant when it comes to relationships, and maybe I need to let go of control a bit, or, you know, where am I lacking in purpose and vision? And because, you know, when I met Greer, as she said, I was very on mission. I was very in my masculine, and like toxic masculine, to be honest. Naturally, I have a deep connection to my feminine nature. That's part of who I am. But at that time in my life, I was very driven. And a large part of why I was very driven is I was trying to get away from my shame. I hadn't done a lot of my shadow work yet. I was trying to prove myself as a man and be enough in the eyes of others. And so ultimately, when we met, I went into a deep healing crisis and went deep into my feminine, could hardly get out of it. It was as useful as a wet sock, and had to be loved and had to learn that I was loved not for what I do, but just for who I am in my being. And yeah, and that was a deep process. That was like 3 years. 3 years of surrender and letting go of this identity that I'd built of being, you know, a goal achiever and go-getter and action taker. And, you know, that's still something, you know, my pendulum doesn't swing so far in the other way, but, you know, I'm still navigating that of like, you know, balancing my inner warrior archetype and my inner lover. It literally, at my men's circle last Friday, I was sharing with the men, like, this is something I'm still working with. Like, I'm still trying to figure out how can I be in my strong warrior and still be compassionate and patient and open and kind and loving. Because when my warrior is on, he can just be really narrow focused and like really lack empathy and care and compassion and consideration. And at the same time, if my lover is too dominant, then I do what's comfortable. I do what's easy. I drink lots of cacao and do psychedelics and like just want to bliss out all day, you know, and then the kingdom starts to fall apart. So it's something I'm still working with, and it's not perfect, but I have come a long way. And being in relationship with Greer has brought me that, has made me face that. So stop looking for a perfect man and look for a man that's willing to do the work, a man that's willing to look into his shadows, to receive feedback that might be hard to hear. That's what she should be looking for, because you're going to be in this work together. And they're the qualities that she should be looking for, not for whether he's on mission or whether he's, you know, emotionally deep. It's does he have integrity? Can he keep his word? Can he be transparent with his own emotional limitations or insecurities? That's more the qualities that are going to shape a transformative, intimate relationship.
Yeah. And I just wanted to, because, and I completely agree. And I guess if I reflect on my my current new relationship, for me, it was just very important. I wasn't looking for a perfect man, just someone who was open and willing to do the work together with me. And but I still sometimes notice when he's done so much in the external world. I think just before we met, he had just gone back to working part-time and is now taking his time. And he's like, you know, I'm happy in this comfort zone, you know, that like he's just enjoying life. He doesn't have a purpose. He's not driven to do anything, no goals, no nothing, just, you know, enjoying life in that I feel like in this very feminine state. But I just notice that because I am currently now very much in the opposite energy, where I'm creating and I'm doing, and I just notice, and I have to come back like, okay, just, you know, just respect him for who he is, not what he does. But it just drives me sometimes mental when he's just sitting on the couch doing nothing and I'm doing a gazillion things. And I think what is triggering me sometimes is that I have this belief that because he said I might never have a goal anymore, you know, maybe it's just, you know, just to be happy and I've done the work, and, you know, like as in the work, you know, like creating income work, maybe I've done enough, and now with working part-time I can cover all the bills. This is enough for me. Maybe it's just about enjoying life. And I don't know, I can't promise you that I will ever have a higher purpose to serve from this moment forward, other than just, you know, focusing on the family and making this work. And that freaks me out in a way, because and this is just maybe my limiting belief, I have believed that a man needs to have a purpose and this drive to, you know, and to be in balance with his feminine. Otherwise, you know, it's like you were saying, that the kingdom will crumble, in a way. I heard you say that. And so I wonder, is there a bit of truth in it? Is it just a very unhelpful belief? And I just wonder about that sometimes. I notice that in the relationship.
Yeah, well, I would say that you got to find what works for you as a couple. Quite honestly, I don't ascribe to the idea that a man has to be on mission all the time. Like, if the woman has that tendency and the man being in that feminine pole allows her to be on mission and purpose, and that works, great. That's awesome. And maybe it's that he has been on mission and he has been in his masculine doing nature to achieve this level of security, that he can actually go into his feminine, and that's balance for him. And maybe that's what he needs as a lesson and as an experience in this stage of his life, to be more integrated, is just to let go and enjoy life a bit more. He could have been working his ass off for 20, 30, 40 years and finally just like be in a place like, and being this. And this is the thing, right? When you go deep into the masculine and feminine, they're two sides of the same coin. Like the masculine in, you know, Eastern tradition being the observer, the witness in presence, yet that's also in beingness, in not doing anything, no action. Okay, that's, you know, quote unquote feminine. You know, feminine is movement, is Shakti, but that's also action. So it's just got to let go of this whole duality of the masculine and feminine, and recognize that men and women have both.
I know.
And it's not 50-50. Like, honestly, Greer has more action capacity than me, and that can be really challenging at times, because my physical energy can be really up and down, and Greer tends to be a lot more steady and has capacity to take action and get things done more than me. And it can be really challenging, not to judge myself for that, yet that's how it is. And I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, and the gift of that is, because I noticed I've gone into judgment, and I think what we haven't named so far is the effect of patriarchy on all of us, and that men have been as impacted by patriarchy as women. You know, we're all, I don't want to say victims, but we're all at the effect of it. And so I've noticed my own patriarchy-ness, and coming from a family of like patriarchy, I mean, you know, of strong doers, that I would have judgment. And it's really only the last few months I've had some really big insights, and wow, like I'm so glad that Aaron is able to hold that pole more fully, because he has led me in his own way to soften much more into that. And I think, you know, if your man is being the most important thing that I heard you share in all of that is that he said, look, to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to have a mission or whatever, because the fact that he's willing to be honest about that, honest about not knowing, that there is the two poles. There's the honest and there's the not knowing in one. That's sacred union right there. And the thing is, even if he was like, I just know I'm going to rock on this for 10 years and I'm going to keep going until I've got this, he might think that now, but next year he might be in a totally different thing. So even if he thought that he knew something, so the most important thing is, Aaron said, he's got the integrity of being honest. He's not pretending that he's got, oh yeah, I'm just going to do it in 3 months' time. He's being honest with you. And he's being honest that what's important to him is family, and he's already got the stability. So like look, goofy. And he just wants to, like, I'm jealous. Like, I'm jelly. Like, that sounds like our dream life, right? Just like a bit of partial income so we can just bliss out and be there for our family. That's what, oh my God, like that mission. What a mission. What a joy of beingness. And as you allow, this is beautiful sovereignty in relationship that allows for the deepest of union, because if you choose to just actually really embrace him in that and allow him for that, and then give yourself permission if that's not your truth. And again, Darren said, if this might be the season, like, remember, balance isn't this. Balance is moving through seasons and knowing that, but you guys are just flipping into spring and we're just flipping into autumn. It doesn't make you guys more right than us. We should be in spring. No, we should be in autumn. It's like, because you've had your rest time. So this is your springtime. And we've been in summer. So we're coming into that. And it's kind of a nice little analogy for relationship. We don't have to be in the same. And yeah, like, great. If he can just be stable and provide some steady income on a part-time basis, and he can focus on what's important to him, which is the family, that's amazing. That's a beautiful support space for you to be on mission. And that's very different than allowing that. Then, well, no, hang on. If I'm on mission, you have to be on mission. Or if he's only part-time, you can only be part-time. That's enmeshment. Yeah.
And
I needed to say that, I think, and also I think from the way, like you were saying, with the patriarchy as well, it's a good addition to that, because that's how I've been brought up, where dad was, the one and mum was the nurturing, and I just think, oh my God, if I'm here but in a way I was thinking, like, like, for him to become fully passive, and that is, I guess, also an old scar, where I was doing everything. I was the cleaner, I was cooking, I was doing everything and being on that mission, and I guess it was triggering this fear, like, of him just being, which is ridiculous, because I know in a rational level he will never be that way, but like this blob that just exists, and I think that is what was triggering that fear, and thanks for clarifying that with me.
Welcome. Yeah. And again, as Aaron said, like, so many men who are on mission are driven from unconscious wounding and the fear of not being enough, which is the human fear that we won't be loved for who we are innately rather than what we do. So, and even, we have the deep privilege and honor of working with couples very intimately, and we get to work with couples who on paper have ticking all the boxes, but when we go in deep, guess what? They've got an adopted child and an inner child and an inner child, and they've got their family system, and they've got the culture, and they've got the pressure of work and the kids, and it's like, it's really easy to look at other people and think, oh, he's that, or he would be perfect, and we've all got our stuff. I've still got my stuff, big time. Aaron's still got his stuff, and again, it's like what we do, and it was like, we show couples, how do you use the relationship as the crucible for healing, so that because there's like a third party in the relationship, and that is the relationship, and that becomes the space holder for us. And knowing that sometimes the more we practice, the better our skills, the more we get it right, but we don't always get it right. And but again, as we learn to trust in the process and really trust that everything, one of Matt Kahn, who we followed, many years ago, he's got a couple of books, and everything that arises, love that. So whatever I bring to the table, the role is to just bring light to that, to bring love to it and see it in its truth, and that everything that's unfolding is here to help us. And that's kind of a viewpoint to which we can choose to see life through. And I certainly use that with my children as the mother of two daughters who I don't see a lot of. There's a lot of their life that I miss out on, and so keep coming back to us. Okay, what am I really being asked to learn here? What's life asking of me? Is it surrender? Is it trust? Is it boundaries? Is it greater compassion? Is it actually coming in and saying no, or is it okay? Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. I think we're already like over an hour. But I'm very, very grateful to be able to have this conversation with you guys. Yeah. Do you feel complete, or is there something that you feel like, oh, this is something that I would want to share based on what we've discussed so far? Is there something?
The one thing that I did want to just add on to that last thread of conversation was, part of the role of the masculine is to bring in structure. And if a man can bring in frame, structure, stability, that allows the feminine to soften. And because that structure, that frame and stability provides safety. And ultimately, woman craves safety. That's part of like the biological wirings of woman is to need safety. And as man, I need to be, secure in myself and have a level of stability within myself and capacity to contain my own emotional storms, to be a safe place for her to bring her feminine storm to me, and to be able to handle that with grace and compassion, and not be overtaken by it, not be overwhelmed by it, and to be able to hold that in patience and compassion.
And would you say the flip to that is what the man really craves is freedom? Yeah. And so my role as your partner is, for me, how I see that is to be a space where I am strong enough within myself that I can hold Aaron's truth, and he has full permission to speak his truth. And what's been beautiful about that is Aaron has shared his stuff, and a lot which has been around, sexuality and sexual desire. And Aaron has been, I've got to be honest, this is what's coming up for me. It has really required me to go deep within of my own enoughness and come into my own self-love and care. And it's been so beautiful. And then because of that, there's been this new level of honesty, and that keeps the intimacy, our sexual intimacy, really alive, because there's continual layers, there's continual discovery of one another. We're not going to bed each night with the same person. There's new aspects, and you get to experience that freedom in being able to speak your truth.
Yeah, there's something so profound in having the safety and trust and security in being able to speak, to these desires, that they lose their charge, them out. And it's really required Greer, as she said, to be really secure in herself and know that she is so enough, and to trust in my love for her, and that, I'm just simply speaking something from my lower nature. But, this is the thing about the shadow. The more we repress it, the more charge it gets, and then the more likely it's going to manifest as some, really dysfunctional habit or pattern or action.
Yeah, and mark my words, everything that Aaron brought up was bringing all the trauma up from my previous relationships. So you know that is half of the course, and that's why it's so perfect. And because then it requires me all of that medicine that I wasn't quite ready to embrace in those previous relationships. Okay, I'm going in and I'm going down. And that's why as a woman, again, our non-linear practice, our different embodiment, our self-care practices, and our own ritual within our life, that's why it's so important to cultivate that for the self, so that I am, just really coming into such a deep place of love and trust within myself. And
and just the final thing I'll add, just to really put a nice ribbon on this, is to really become acutely aware of each other's tendencies around the emotion of shame, because it can manifest very differently in a couple, like in individuals. So for me, my most common way that I react to shame is anger, whereas for Greer, her reaction to shame was shut down and withdraw. So two very different, like literally polar behaviors, one aggressor, one withdrawing, but at the core of it, we're both experiencing the same emotion of not enoughness, shame, toxic shame, feeling like we're inadequate, there's something wrong with us, not enough as a man, not enough as a woman, because that core wound is prevalent and is so hard to face, so hard to integrate and really feel. And we do, as humans, we do so much to get away from this emotion. And again, something I shared, that emotional literacy. Okay, outwardly I'm feeling angry and I'm wanting to get away, but if I really tune in and go deeper, I'm actually not feeling enough. And we only really cultivated this skill by sharing from that transparent, honest place, and being able to work through the layers of like, well, this is how I feel, and this is how I feel, and like, well, I don't feel enough, and I don't feel enough either, and we're both like, so we do locally.
And it also means over time that, as Aaron said, we pick up on these tendencies, and so we become so attuned to one another, so that if Aaron does, which you hardly ever do, become not physically aggressive, but that aggressive energy, and I'm very attuned to it. So I know now that that's a shame piece for him. It's got nothing to do with me, and so my role in that is to not try and fix him, but just to hold the space of love, and for me to see him through the eyes of his wholeness. And likewise, if I'm in like that, I remember you used to say, I feel like you're withholding love from me. Actually, I was just protecting myself, and it had nothing to do with him. And so as we learn our how our shadow plays out, and we can read that, we not take it so personally, and so we react less, so we're not going further and further apart. We can turn towards one another, and then we can support one another and ourselves in that.
Which is just another way that we balance each other out in relationship. For Greer, she had to learn to be a bit more strong around my fiery anger, and for me, I just had to learn to chill that out and to soften and to be more calm with that, be able to feel it but not express it so viciously.
And to the point where, again, like when we heal these things, we'll naturally pendulum it a bit to come into balance. If I've always been this way, in order to come into balance, I need to swing a bit that way. And so again, that's why last night I was like, wow, we were in bed and we were in arms, and I said, I'm finding it, and noticing I'm really finding it hard to soften into you, which didn't used to be my pattern at all. I'd be like kind of softening meekly like that, but I was just like, so again, noticing that in my body and voicing that, and I was saying, well, what do you need from me? And okay, well, what I need is this, and then it comes together. But again, it's not necessarily but that repair comes in, and we're richer for it. Literally today, our relationship is different from last night, and then from our walks this morning because of that. So we're stronger than we were yesterday. We're deeper. That love has expanded. Okay, I'll stop talking.
No, but perfect. I think it was great to add that last bit on. I think it's very valuable, and so Yeah, very grateful. Is there anything that you want to share about upcoming things that you're doing that you want to make people aware of, or will that be?
Yeah, well, we run a free online workshop where we share 2 intimacy practice. One is a communication framework, and one is a sexual chemistry practice. We run that we've got 4 happening this month, so we can drop a link for that. We have couples retreats that we run.
But most importantly is the 8-week program, 8-week boot camp program.
Yes,
like
that's true.
It is like, that's the real, like, if you want the skill set to be able to relate, to be able to move through, not just move through triggers, but really alchemize them into deep connection and intimacy and trust. Like we lay it out in a very clear step-by-step framework, and you can start to identify the strategies of what happens when you're triggered. And again, awareness is so crucial to this, so that you can be aware that when your adaptive child's playing out, and you can start to stop it in its tracks, and then start to bring in the winning strategies of tending to each other's needs, learning to cherish each other more, celebrating what's working, etc.
Yeah, and we run that over 8 weeks, and we work 2-on-2 with a couple. So it's just like kind of a private coaching program, but it's a structured program. But then we work actively in therapeutic coaching with the couples as we go. So yeah, that is the big one. It's just nice for people to have a taster for us, but I guess I've had a bit of a taster for us.
Yeah. So okay, so the 8-week program is a one-on-one thing.
Yeah, 2-on-2.
2-on-2.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. But at least not in a group setting. It's
no. Yeah.
Okay, and it's in a physical setting or also online.
Online. It's online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know.
So it's the online workshop, the free one, obviously, because it's online. But then we do run retreats in Tasmania and mainland Australia. And we've got dreams of New Zealand and Bali in the next year or 2. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Oh, thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions, they're super welcome to email us or PM us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Let's
Enjoy your evening.
Okay.